Our three in-person witnesses are now at the witness table. We'd like to begin our afternoon panel as soon as the hall comes to order. Thank you.
These guys I've asked to stand by in case somebody. That's all I'm saying is during the lunch break they have to get that aside. In order to get things back to the witness or to these. I'm not talking about this. I mean, this one.
Yours.
In other words, there's going to be something on this, so that would be a good time to get this. So
when you want me to do this, I'll do it anytime.
Well,
like right now.
If you have time.
Yeah. Well, you're the chair. All we're doing is eating into lunch.
But this is not part of the official.
Yeah.
So it's probably better at lunch.
I think when we can talk about it.
Right.
Okay. Why don't you try gaveling this to order? And then we'll do the oath. Then we'll do the oath again. They'll be quiet when we start the oath generally. All the witnesses are here. We're missing a couple of committee members.
I understand, but we're moving ahead.
And Mr. Bassett's involved in briefing the witnesses. Again, it's now 11:17. We'd like to begin as soon as possible. If the hall could come to order, please.
This hearing is now. This is. I understand. This hearing is now in order. I understand that all the witnesses are here. If some of the panel members are not here, well, we're moving ahead, so please get here. Initially, like to.
If we could have quiet in the hall, please. Thank you.
We're going to start with Mr. Steve Bassett, not as someone that's testifying here, but introducing a video, as I understand it.
Well, we should start with the oath.
Excuse me. We need to start with the oath. Would you please swear in the witnesses?
Ms. Howell and gentlemen, if you would please stand and repeat after me. I do hereby affirm that I will tell the truth and nothing but the truth to this committee today. Thank you.
Yes, and this is what's been, this is the, as I understand it, the Truth Embargo panel. Is that a fair statement of this panel? Great. And I'd like to call upon Stephen Bassett to, to say
just a couple of opening remarks.
Opening remarks and a film, as I understand it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
The reason I asked for the committee's time is that what comes next is a little more, how would you say, nuanced and complicated, because it's not a person here. It's going to be a video. Now, this is a judgment call. Obviously, we prefer to have an individual here testifying under their own name. In this case, we're going to have a 15-minute video of someone whose name is not going to be used, though his countenance will be used. In a sense, this video represents the many individuals out there who could not come before a committee like this, who want to talk, but it's difficult. The vast majority of individuals who have interacted with this issue while working for the government, going back to the 40s, took the information that they had to their grave and did not talk if they were told not to talk. That's fine, and that's perfectly okay. Some have, some haven't, some have been conflicted. This gentleman posed a decision, meaning, do we do this or not? Do we run this video? And ultimately, the decision was mine, and mine alone, to do this. No one else within the organization. This individual is in extremely poor health and probably will not be with us much longer. The reason that the individual does not want the name used is that the story is quite powerful, his intersection was quite powerful, and he's received numerous threats from his government not to talk. It has been a while since the last threats were issued, which included his family, but and I think times have changed, but we understand that just because I feel that way doesn't mean that he feels that way, and he's still concerned. Fine. But he wanted this testimony to be presented. We agreed, and that's why you're going to hear it today. And probably the key thing that made the decision to go ahead with showing this video, and by the way, we want the lights to be dimmed definitely when this video shows, so that's not washed out. So we will be lowering the lights in the house for the video, is that as it happens, he has been interviewed by 2 researchers, and they are here at the table today. Linda Moulton Howe interacted with this gentleman almost 14 years ago when he was thinking of coming forward, but then backed away due to threats to his family and himself. And then recently, Richard Dolan interviewed him. And so that gives us a very strong perspective and ability to, quote, address the video, what it means. But ultimately, I would like to say this, that what you see in this video is the intersection of the human aspect of the truth embargo and the policy of the truth embargo. There are consequences, people are affected, and that's just the way that it is. There's also fundamental important testimony here, and I should also add that this is 15 minutes of many hours of interview. There is a lot more information than this. However, we have no desire to, quote, press to get that out. We don't want this gentleman to be vetted. He wants to finish out his life in peace, well and good. So I leave it to the audience to judge the value of this video and obviously the veracity of it. Each person will come to their own conclusion. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we'll turn the screen.
Yes, well, as we get older and older, I'm 77 right now. You can't live forever, you know. So if procedure I'm going to have to clean the blood doesn't work, then I've got probably a few more months to make it before my kidneys shut down, you know. So that's kind of why I'm kind of going along with the interview at this time.
You're seeing that what you went through is just too important for people not to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just, can we start at the beginning with your military career and just walk through what exactly your experiences were?
Was drafted into the military and got into the U.S. Army. After that, I was sent to the Signal Training Center in eastern United States.
What year would this be?
58. I went through the Signal Training course. And at that time, I went through the radio teletype course and also the cryptography course, crypto. They had 5 instructors that were getting out of military service. So they pulled the top 5 students, and I was 3rd in the class. So I got pulled as an instructor.
Now, were you at this time also working yet for CIA?
No.
Not yet?
No. After one day, my boss came to me, and he said, how would you like to, make some extra money? And I said, oh, money is good. So he's explained to me that he could put it through, would have to get a top secret White House Q clearance for the job, And I thought, boy, must be a pretty exclusive thing, And I said, well, what is this? And he said that I'm director for the CIA for Eastern United States, And I said, oh, I didn't know that. And he said, you weren't supposed to. After about 6 weeks, my security clearance came through, and I got my CIA card. It was an ID card, like a credit card, where I could just go up to the door and slice it, walk right in. And my name at that time, I used an artificial name too, never used my real name. I started working with him on the project he was on, and that was Project Blue Book, which was kind of partially a fraud.
You're saying some of the Blue Book cases were,
Yes.
were completely fictitious?
Yes. But the cases that we got came from, I think it was Fort Belvoir, Maryland.
Fort Belvoir?
Yeah. And it didn't come from the Pentagon, or it didn't come from CIA headquarters. But we would get reports about a certain sighting that they had in Mexico or Italy or something like that. And then we had people that would follow through on it, that would go out and interview the people to see if they were nutcases or if it was real, you know.
So they'd be going overseas frequently?
I wasn't, but I always stayed statewide. But the people we had working with us from the CIA would do that. We would get like a new report probably a couple times a week. I was coming into the Army fresh off the farm, you know, so I really didn't have much knowledge of anything, but my boss filled me in on Project Blue Book and what they had found so far, as far as grays and aliens and the Roswell incident.
How did you feel when this first got dumped on you? When you first learned about this?
I was just kind of overwhelmed with all of this, you know. And I said to him, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be a judge of this type of thing. What's real, what's not, when I don't have much knowledge of it, you know. So
What did he say?
he said, well, we have to build the information as we go, and you'll see how this thing is working out.
And then the other thing is, of course, you really weren't able to tell family or close friends, obviously.
No, I couldn't tell anybody. In fact, I had to take a vow that I wouldn't tell anybody. A lot of it for 40 years, and more of it for 50 years, which is up in 2010.
You're doing all this crypto work, you're looking at images, photographs, video. It's 1958, maybe the fall of 58. What happened after this?
At that time, the Project Blue Book thing kind of went pot, you know. If you remember, back in those days, they kind of declared it as a nothing, you know.
Right.
And
They were telling the world all UFOs are misidentifications, hoaxes,
balloons,
psychological issues, whatever.
yes.
Yeah.
So my boss came to me and he says, we've both got a new assignment. And he says, oh, I said, where are we going? Oh, he says, we're going to the Capitol. We're going to be part of the Eisenhower push. He's trying to find out something about, all about these aliens that MJ-12 was supposed to find out, but never sent back reports to him.
The MJ-12, the UFO control group, were they calling it MJ-12 at that time? Yes.
They called us in, went into the Oval Office, and President Eisenhower was there and Nixon, and they said, we called the people in from MJ-12 from Area 51 and S4, but they told us that the government had no jurisdiction over what they were doing. So being a general, past general, you didn't tell them to go to hell without any real good reason, you know. So he said, I want you and your boss to fly out there. I want you to give them a personal message. And he says, I want you to tell them, whoever is in charge, tell them that to get in, they have this week, coming week, to get into Washington and to report to me. And if they don't, I'm going to get the 1st Army from Colorado, and we're going to go over, we're going to take the base over. I don't care what kind of classified material you got. We're going to rip this thing apart.
Eisenhower was going to invade
Yes,
Area 51.
Yeah, with the 1st Army.
So you go out with your superior.
Yes.
You fly out. You land. What happens? Can you describe this whole process? What you saw?
They took us the 13 or 15 miles south to S4 and like different garage door openings.
Okay.
And in these garage door openings, they had like different saucer crafts. The very first one had the Roswell craft in. It was kind of crashed up, but apparently every alien that was in it died except for a couple.
So you see the Roswell craft, and what are some of the others that you see?
Well, the Roswell craft was really strange because it looked like real heavy aluminum foil. We could rock next to it, and you could rock it. The whole thing probably weighed 150, 300 pounds.
Could they tell what the source of power was of this craft?
Yeah, it was like a reverse gravitational thing of some kind. In fact, one later on, I got the mathematical code for reversing gravity in a 3x5 card. I guess there are different types of grays and so on.
How did you see that evidence?
Well, at the later on at S4, we viewed the autopsy film, and then the colonel said, "What we've got in here is we're interviewing a gray alien."
All right, right there. How did you feel at that moment?
Well, I thought, boy, we had no idea we were going to see the real thing. All we saw was film.
You had to have a little bit of heart racing at that
Yes.
moment.
My boss was able to go in and had like a partial interview with him.
So what did this gray alien look like? Could you describe him a little bit?
This one looked a little bit oriental.
So I'm just wondering if it looked almost human, what about this didn't look human?
No, it didn't look human as far as the skin tone and basically the shape of it and the size.
How was its head size compared with a normal human, for example?
Brain was kind of a little bit bigger. And some of the nose was very, very small. And the ears were just like holes. Mouth was very small.
Now, why were they bringing you out here at all, anyway, to see an alien? What was the point?
To go back and tell the president they actually had one.
So he did not know at this point
No,
if there was an alien at S4.
no.
What did you do then at Area? Were you done, or did you have other things to do with
Yeah, so
S4?
basically we were kind of done, went back to Area 51. They took us into the main building, and there we saw a U-2, which of course we didn't know existed. And a model of the SR-71.
Yeah, the Blackbird.
So, but like I mentioned earlier, it was not a model of the current Blackbird. but
It's an
later
earlier
Black
version.
But an early version.
Did you go directly to Washington after this?
Yes.
Or did you go somewhere else? How did they get, did you fly regular airline or?
We flew back to the commuter plane back to the air base, and then took President Eisenhower's Lockheed Electra back to Washington.
You and your supervisor,
Yeah.
superior officer, and now you're meeting with the president?
Yes.
Can you describe this?
Well, we met with him in, the second story of the old OSS warehouse building. And Eisenhower and Nixon were there. And also Hoover was there. So he asked us what was going on. And we told him about the alien, the whole situation. And the black projects and so on. And he was just totally shocked. He appeared for the first time to be worried. You know, like he was worried.
I would think that Eisenhower would, I mean, he certainly knew that flying saucers were real.
Yes.
He knew that there were aliens. So I guess I'm just wondering, what would he have been, really surprised about?
Surprised about the black programs. Eisenhower said, got to keep this thing completely secret. You know, can't talk about this.
Your actual name is, the name you grew up with, that was a different name than what you had in the...
I never used it in the CIA at all.
Now, what about today? You're going on the public record, and this is still sensitive information, even though earlier you talked about, security oaths that maybe expire after a certain period of
50
time,
years.
but you're still concerned.
Linda Moulton Howell's phone call, her phone was tapped, and they got my phone number, and through the telephone company, they're able to find me, and so on.
When they found you, what happened?
I was going to a grocery store. Two guys in a black suits come out of a black Lincoln town car and came over to see me. And they told me that I better not publish anything or talk to Linda about any more things. So at that time, I did, I stopped.
That was enough to intimidate you.
Yes. Rather remain anonymous. Never show my face on anything.
Really, thank you for doing this.
Yes. This was, I guess, kind of a good idea because I feel much better having talked about it. I kind of feel like there's a load off my shoulders.
Really?
Because I had an awful lot of secrets that I had kept over the years.
I'd like to now hear from Linda Moulton Howe. And could the timekeeper give me an indication of the time limits on the remaining witnesses?
If we're going to have a 1 hour lunch, we have an hour and 5 minutes remaining.
Okay, so...
If we don't want an hour lunch, we have 2 hours and 5
you
minutes
usually been,
remaining.
calculating out the math, so... go ahead, you've got 10 minutes.
In the summer of 1994, I spent 3 days and 3 nights in that gentleman's home. No one on the planet knew where I was, not my family, not anyone. I recorded 11 90-minute audio tapes with him. I knew that I was in the presence of somebody who was telling the truth to the best of his ability, and that the military cover of levels of intelligence in this country has been used for a very long time. On the surface, he was a cryptologist working in the United States Army. But as he described in the film, he took on a role, highly classified, working for the CIA, and his boss was reporting to Langley from reports that were coming into Fort Belvoir. And he described to me in great detail the autopsy footage that he had seen of non-humans, describing the unusual brains and the unusual internal organs, and the fact that they were screening film disguised as being on a southeastern military base, and that the film that they were screening on a regular basis was coming from around the world. He had seen film from Italy in which non-humans were outside of a craft, and the film had been taken from a nearby peak in a mountain. He talked about Area 51 from his firsthand experience of being there on the other side of what would be a one-way mirror, while his boss from Langley was inside with a non-human, and that he himself had seen some of the craft, like a museum that's inside a Papoose mountain. After those 3 days and 3 nights where no one knew where I was, I left to do something that would be normal in the normal 9-to-5 world. And when I returned to my home then in Philadelphia, I remember going to the phone and voicemail, and the last thing that we had agreed upon was that I would return in approximately 4 weeks with a video crew in which I had was preparing a statement for him and for me to sign, that I would do a videotape interview like my 11 audio tapes, and I would hold it until after his death. He thought that he was not going to live very long in '94. So I was surprised to hear his voice on my voicemail say, "Linda, my wife and I went to the supermarket after you left, and 2 men were leaning against our car when we came out of the supermarket. And they said, 'We want to remind you that you have been a loyal American, and we are here to tell you that you are never to talk with Linda Moulton Howe again or to discuss this subject.'" None of those 11 hours of my audio tapes would have been in the phone calls. So it means that they were listening to our 3 days and 3 nights in the house. And I promised him from that point on that I would never discuss him or the material. And in fact, later on, I received information from someone unknown that he was dead. So I am personally gratified to see that he made a statement today for this citizen hearing, because he is scratching the surface of how complex this is and how military and intel people have been intimidated for not only their whole careers but their whole lives, to never tell the truth about something so fundamental as we are not alone in this universe, that non-humans have been interacting with this planet for millennia, and you have just heard from one of the firsthand. I had placed before you a prepared statement concerning truth embargo and a whole other experience that I had in Kirtland Air Force Base in 1983 that would have been a decade before being able to talk with this man. I hope that you will read it in its entirety. I know I don't have time this morning to go through it, but I can summarize that blocking truth, that we're calling the truth embargo, has been the intent of the American government's official policy of denial since 1947, when the President Truman administration decided that all information about non-human intelligences interacting with this planet should be kept from the public and media, and that includes Congress and the Supreme Court and all machinery of our government except for those designated as having, quote unquote, a need to know, and the pro words and the numbers that have gone with the few people who have had total access in MJ-12. I encountered truth embargoes repeatedly as I investigated the bloodless, trackless animal mutilations in Colorado and the surrounding region for my TV documentary special of Strange Harvest beginning in September of 1979. And I have provided for you a letter from United States Senator Harrison Schmitt, dated March 14, 1979. It is attached to my statement. And it was a letter that Apollo astronaut and then U.S. Senator Harrison Schmitt of New Mexico had sent to constituents announcing a conference in Albuquerque to be held on April 20th, 1979, to discuss the ongoing and persistent problem of animal mutilations, and he wanted the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to investigate. And that 1979 meeting was held, and 5 months later, in September 1979, as Director of Special Projects at the CBS station in Denver, I began what became a 9-month, 18-hour-a-day, 7 days a week investigation. And I went to Santa Fe, and I did an interview with Senator Schmitt. And one of the most important things that he told me was, to my question, are you aware of any intelligence committee or any agency that you have communicated with who has told you that we are dealing with extraterrestrial biological entities as the perpetrators of worldwide animal mutilations, as law enforcement repeatedly had told me? And I remember the pause and the look on his face when he said no, and I remember that his next words were, "But I am not surprised at your question or the implications." And his request as a United States Senator to have the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation formally investigate animal mutilations was blocked. He told me that firsthand. The rest of the pages of the statement that I have submitted to you occurred after I was contracted with Home Box Office on March 21st, 1983, to do an hour special that would follow up A Strange Harvest about the animal mutilations, and they had a working title in the contract that I would produce for them, an hour special called UFOs, the ET Factor. And at the time, there was an attorney in New York named Peter Gersten. He was the first attorney to file against the CIA, the NSA, National Reconnaissance Organization, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and other military agencies under the brand new Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, for documents that those agencies had. And what Peter Gersten found was, initially, the Central Intelligence Agency denied that it had any information or documents, but that the National Security Agency had 118. So he would send the Central Intelligence Agency's formal letter to the National Security Agency asking for the documents referenced by the CIA. And the National Security Agency would send him a formal letter referencing the fact that the Central Intelligence Agency had 35 documents shared with the National Security Agency. And eventually, he assembled dozens of documents that came from those agencies, each one pointing a finger at the other. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied to hear what essentially was a New York attorney representing Citizens Against UFO Secrecy and what was called Ground Saucer Watch under the first Freedom of Information Act, simply asking for information from our government about documents that they all said they had. And even though the Supreme Court denied that they would take on that lawsuit, out of it came many pages of blacked out information that has been held up by Stanton Friedman and others of us over the years, that agencies who are not allowed to speak and who have been responsible for counterintelligence since World War II to convince us that there's nothing to this phenomena
The witness
are the
has
very
about-
agencies.
The witness
that
has
know.
about 1 minute remaining.
They are the very agencies who have the information and have been interlinked with Majestic 12 that was appointed by President Harry S. Truman within a very short period of time after the crash retrievals in July of 1947, and that Majestic 12, MJ-12, whatever the letters and numbers are in 2013, the same kind of inner sanctum agency still exists interacting with other inside inner sanctum black agencies. There is a parallel black budget, there's a parallel government, and this is how the truth that this gentleman described and that many people in our government have known since at least 1941, when there was another crash retrieval from Missouri and an instrument called a neutronic propulsion unit was hand-delivered to Oppenheimer for his use in developing and researching what became the atomic bomb. And finally, the truth embargo, so that you would have reference to the two agencies that in the beginning had the most information, the Atomic Energy Commission and the Department of the Navy. All of those documents of all of the truth that he has said that I have tried to report about now for 33 years, they are essentially off limits to any access by Congress or even the President, because they are classified as only under a need to know, and probably Suitland, Maryland archive has them.
And the witness is time. Thank you. I'd like to, now the panel will hear from Richard Dolan. You have 10 minutes.
Greetings, honored members of the committee. I'm very pleased about the interview that everyone was just shown and grateful that Linda Moulton Howe was able to elaborate on that. I'm happy to discuss this also if the committee members have questions, but I have a different angle of approach this time. The truth embargo, as I see it, as I understand it, let's call it a big picture analysis. I would start by saying one of the striking things about UFOs is simply the discrepancy between the quantity of astonishing sightings we have on the one hand and the lack of responsible treatment of this by our major media, also our academic and our scientific institutions, and indeed our political system. This is a shame because there's very good research that's being done every day. And many of those researchers have been here this week. Others are out there too, such as the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, NARCAP, which was referenced in the previous panel by Jim Courant. They collect and analyze encounters that the aviation industry has had with unknown objects. There are thousands of such cases. Another group is Project 1947, which has documented UFO phenomena during the early Cold War years. There are outstanding websites, such as ufoevidence.org. There are also many excellent research groups in Europe and elsewhere in the world. None of them get any love from America's dum-dum media, which prefers to lump the whole subject into a big tinfoil hat and instead write about the latest escapades of Kim Kardashian. But this is a symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. And to understand why there is a truth embargo, we need to come to terms with the fact that America's major media groups lost their independence a long time ago. We all know about media consolidation. We all know about the intimate relationships that have existed for years between the elite members in the corporate media empire and the political leadership, and particularly with the military and intelligence community. Last year, one example only, it was learned that the Pentagon spends some $4 billion a year to sway public opinion. Now, aside from asking just why Americans ought to be paying their own government to brainwash them, I mean, talk about getting shafted both ways, this is just one facet of many that highlight a revolving door through which passes the military-industrial complex, the media, the academic community, and more. National security money, which is our nation's greatest and most egregious waste of all, has infiltrated everything, and that certainly means the once-upon-a-time integrity of our journalists and media corporations. This is repugnant to any freedom-loving people. But those individuals benefiting from this system are not freedom-loving, unless they mean their own freedom. The bottom line is that because UFOs are a definite matter of national security, those national security decision-makers have made it certain that this subject remains out of sight as much as possible. Is this not obvious by now? Now, why would they do this? Well, many reasons. Let's touch on the matter of oil, because even a child can understand that these objects don't need oil to go from point A to point B. Whatever powers flying saucers, it's something different, something better. So if the president were to announce the reality of these things, how long do you think it would take before scientists openly begin to study the nature of the propulsion and power system of UFOs? This would immediately challenge oil, not simply as the world's leading source of power, but it would severely threaten the entire global financial system, which is based upon oil. And probably 90% of the value of any product you can think of is determined by the energy that went into making and transporting it, and in most cases that means oil. To say nothing of the millions of jobs that rely on the petroleum industry. We're talking one big overhaul of everything that matters in the global economy. Can we think for an instant that those individuals in the know haven't thought about this? Especially if there is that holy grail involved, some form of free energy. And what if this new form of energy can't be easily monetized? What if? Could the global financial structure afford free energy? A perverse question, to be sure, but one that has to be important to those individuals at the top of the human power structure. And of course, there is the political nightmare. Any announcement of this reality would come at the cost of worldwide public anger. No one wants to learn that they've been lied to for an entire human lifetime. They would want to know just how this secret was kept. That's a very big key right there. That would lead inevitably to questions about why Congress was kept out of the loop, why our major institutions missed the boat, and just who has been managing the secret. And that would lead, obviously, to a wholesale investigation of black budget America, shining sunlight into a very dark place. And what might we find? Well, consider. Just consider that Roswell was indeed what the researchers here 2 days ago discussed so eloquently and cogently, that it was the retrieval of alien technology and perhaps bodies. In fact, there are a number of well-researched UFO crash events, so suppose for a moment that it happened. That would mean that the cover-up involves much more than mere knowledge of other beings here on planet Earth. It would mean there is possession of such advanced technology as to be nearly incomprehensible, at least at first. Hard to consider, and yet an inevitable conclusion. So what happens when teams of brilliant scientists with total secrecy and nearly limitless black budget funds are able to study recovered alien technology for many years and even decades? Could it not be that, given enough time and effort, even if they couldn't replicate what they found, they might have learned a few things? Some such claims have been made, and it's reasonable to suppose that breakthroughs would have been made. Breakthroughs such as solid-state electronics, fiber optics, high-tensile fibers, lasers, and an array of other money-making opportunities for the defense and other industries. None of this has been proven, but it is also true that the private research undertaken in classified environments is not easy for outside researchers to observe. And in fact, it would be very easy to hide the Roswell connection in the historical treatment of these and other technologies. Another relevant consideration of such breakthroughs is that they would reduce to zero any incentive to reveal the secret to the public. Why give up the goose that lays golden eggs? But now matters become even more interesting, because what if some of the breakthroughs were even more significant? What if they included secrets to what is known as field propulsion or electrogravitics? What if they led to a new source of energy, something that could replace petroleum? To those managing these special access programs, they could never allow such breakthroughs to see the light of day. Of course, those scientists doing the research would need to continue and learn everything they could about electrogravitics, anti-gravity, new sources of energy, and any related topics. Consider also what happens when such breakthroughs become classified. We know it happens all too frequently that public science has become hostage to national security. What we're looking at is a situation in which the classified black budget world, at least part of it, has gone so far ahead of the rest of us, we may, with justice, almost look upon them as a separate society, something I've sometimes called a breakaway civilization. How far ahead might some of that classified world be? Those of us on the outside trying to peek in can only make educated guesses or investigate occasional leaks. My own conclusion, at least for now, is that they are very far ahead indeed, with the ability even to enter and leave Earth orbit with much greater ease than people suspect, perhaps a clandestine space fleet, most likely a significant built infrastructure, a large portion of which is deep underground, and even, why not, possible encounters with non-human intelligences. Why would that be so impossible? To what extent would such a group even answer to the President of the United States? Do they rather answer to private, international, financial powers, which basically is how the whole world already operates? I had a long conversation once with a retired senior intelligence official. He had given briefings to...
I hate to interrupt. The witness has about 1 minute. I just want to...
I have 1 minute left. Thank you. This gentleman had given briefings to President Reagan. This man knows a very great deal about UFOs and told me that he had spoken to 18 former presidents, CIA directors, and DoD secretaries about UFOs after their retirement. Their attitudes fell into 3 categories. One group, roughly 3 or 4 of them, said essentially, "What's wrong with you? Why waste your time with that nonsense?" Another equally small group made it clear that they had been briefed on the matter and knew that it was serious. But the largest group, at least half of all of the individuals who had been at the pinnacle of power, had said, "You know about UFOs? I would love to know about that, but got nowhere. Can you share what you know?" In other words, our top political leadership, with a few exceptions, is locked out of this subject because they come and go. But the program managers are lifers. They seem to answer to someone else. Recall the words of the late Senator Daniel Inouye from 1987, "There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself." He was on to something.
And the witness, thank you. You are, the last two witnesses have been particularly good at keeping it right within the time limit. We sure appreciate that. I'm going to reserve my time. Each member will have 5. Oh, I really apologize to Mr. Torres. I'm sorry. Been watching timers and things so much. Jeffrey Torres, you got 10 minutes.
My pleasure. Well, good day to everybody. My name is Jeffrey Torres. I'm not going to talk about myself much. I'm a veteran. I served the United States Air Force. I'm talking here today about my father. I'm the son of Major Milton John Torres. My father served in the U.S. Air Force from 1951 to 1971. And regrettably, my father cannot attend this hearing as he is now suffering from ill health directly related to combat from the Vietnam War. I told him before I left that I was coming on his behalf, and he expressed his deep gratitude that I was coming here today to testify and tell you folks his story. First of all, I would like to give you a brief history of who my father was and his accomplishments. Dad earned a bachelor's degree in general engineering with a minor in chemistry, and he completed his master's degree in aerospace engineering from University of Oklahoma in 1961. His military career was spent over the span of 20 years. Dad served as a fighter pilot flying the F-86D, according to him, the best airplane ever made, as well as the F-100. He was a decorated pilot, achieving the title of USAF Command Pilot. Dad flew over 300 combat missions in Vietnam as a forward air controller in Vietnam. He received 13 air medals, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. And I know firsthand that he was even put in for the Air Force Cross, to which he denied because of political reasons, which we'll not get into here. My father attained the rank of major, as well as during his career he also worked with NASA as a chief of range control for the Gemini and Apollo moon missions. After Dad retired from the United States Air Force, Dad worked for Pan Am as an engineer and later acquired his doctorate in mechanical engineering from the University of Miami. My father's last job was as a professor at Florida National University, teaching engineering. During his tenure at FIU, he invented a chemical encoding process using a polymer to prevent catastrophic metal fatigue on aircraft and received a patent for that process. Dad retired from FIU in 2004. So now we'll go on to Dad's story and the event that happened. I will go into some details he shared with our family, but before I do, I want to point out something here, that my father, he kept his secret for over 50 years. He never told anyone, and he honored his oath to this country. And he never had the chance to tell his story to my grandfather, his father, who he loved very, very much. And I've never seen my father cry until this story broke. Sadly, my father kept it all from everyone, including us and my family. Not even telling his father's story when he was the closest man that he ever had. I know Dad would never have discussed this event if not for it being declassified by the Minister of Defense, Nick Pope, out of the UK. After the event was declassified, Dad shared the story often with us. It was May 20th, 1957. Dad was stationed at RAF Manston, England. Dad was working on intercept standby. Of course, this was cycled between the pilots in this particular event. It was Dad's turn. Dad was again flying the F-86D. This aircraft was a D model, which meant it was an all-weather fighter. Dad told me that the RAF Manston was a main intercept squadron during the Cold War in England. Dad was on alert with his wingman and some of the ground crew in the ready room. That night was a typical English night with the weather being poor and foggy. The notification came down from the ready room indicating a scramble. Dad ran for his plane. The scramble was initiated. Dad jumped in his cockpit. If you could, please, I put the photo of Dad's aircraft if anybody would like to see the airplane. And I have one saved on the, anyhow. So he jumped in his cockpit upon getting the authentication code to fire. He then realized that this was no drill. They normally would never give you an authentication code, and they told him it was a hot mission. He had orders to shoot this thing down. Dad told me whatever this thing was, they wanted it down, and he thought he was starting World War III. All kinds of thoughts were in his head. The intercept controller ordered Dad to fire a full salvo of 24 rockets at this object. Dad later told me that he knew full well how serious this event was. Dad was in his aircraft. His aircraft came to life, and he was given an order to go gate, which meant full afterburners would be used. After getting airborne, Dad said, "Do you want me to continue with the afterburners?" Affirmative, go gate. In other words, they wanted him to close in on this thing, and they wanted him there fast. Dad was told to vector over to the North Sea. The object had been sighted hovering over East Ipswich. Dad told me he had a confirmation of the target acquisition from the ground radar. His jet flying with full afterburners was now headed towards the North Sea, and Dad was flying at 32,000 feet in full afterburner and heavy cloud cover with zero visibility. However, with his radar was painting a target as big as an aircraft carrier at that altitude. Dad was fast approaching the target, and the object kept pulling in front of him just beyond range. It was toying with him. Finally, he was able to get his radar lock on the object. Dad said this thing was huge, and the blip was so big that it was easy to get target acquisition. Right before he got the instruction to fire from the radar control set, the target made an erratic side-to-side movement and moved beyond range, causing Dad to lose lock on his target. The object then accelerated from 0 to Mach 10 in seconds, and Dad was unable to fire as a result. He lost complete lock. Dad told me his radar, his wingman's radar on the ground radar confirmed it as well. They had lost lock and they were totally perplexed as to what happened. So, make a long story short, the most compelling thing Dad said was that this thing was doing things that no ordinary aircraft could do. It was defying the laws of physics, and he was convinced that it was of alien origin. Anyhow, during that time, there was nothing in the Air Force that could come close to it. The F-86 could barely make Mach 0.98 Mach. It would make Mach 1 in its complete dive at the time. And this thing did Mach 10. There was no known aircraft that could do this. So upon landing his aircraft, Dad was contacted by the intercept officer on a secure phone. The person on the line told him that what happened was considered classified and not to discuss this with anyone, from his wingman to his commander. He would be debriefed in the morning. Dad told me he realized how lucky he was, as if he did manage to fire at this object, it probably would have vaporized him. And off the record, he was scared shitless. So he did tell me that the following day, Dad reported for duty. A call came in from a man that was from the NSA, and he called him a spook. For us, it was much more personal, this whole event, because the spook came in and swore Dad to secrecy, that he would never, ever repeat what he'd seen, and it was a matter of national security. The guy showed his credentials. He locked himself in a room with Dad for about a half hour and threatened to pull his wings and everything else that he held dear, including, God knows his family.
And the witness has about 1 more minute.
Okay, I'll make it short. My dad waited 40 years for this, and I forgive me. I'll make it quick here. Guys like my dad are heroes. Guys like Edgar Mitchell. When I was a kid, I watched these guys from the side of the beach, watching the Apollo moon launches. And now we're riding with the Russians to the moon now. We can't even go ourselves anymore. And yet the media has blasphemized these great men. How can they? How dare them? How dare them, and how dare everybody stay silent here when people like my dad held this secret? People died that never could tell the secret in Vietnam. It's a shame. It's a real shame that our media is bought and paid for by the Kardashians and the corporate industries of this country and the world. And this truth needs to come out, because there's a lot of people, including my family, who suffered and ridiculed. My father got ridiculed. My brother took phone calls from ridiculing people. And my dad had a PhD. What more do they want? Astrophysicists are saying these things are real, and we're being ridiculed. That's all I have to say, and help this country.
I want to thank the panel very much, and indicate to the members that we've got 6 minutes each for questioning. I will reserve my minutes, and we'll reverse the order a bit here, and we'll start with Representative Kilpatrick. If you would start the question.
I reserve my time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we're to Senator Gravel.
Linda, would you, when this gentleman that was interviewed, and this would go to Richard also, when he was talking about that he saw an extraterrestrial being, was it dead or alive? So we had imprisoned this person or this being. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Many more than one. We have had many more than one. In this particular case, this was at Area 51 inside of the Papoose Mountain. If you look at a map, the inside of the Papoose Mountain at Area 51 is an installation, multi-leveled, hidden by the Papoose Mountain. Many people have leaked to me and to others about working there. And in there are offices, as we would recognize as offices, and his CIA boss and the man in the film and a couple of others were taken to one of these offices where there was a one-way on the other side. I don't know, because it's his point of view. Was it a mirror or was it a reflective glass? But nevertheless, the man you just heard was standing on this side of the glass looking at his boss in the room with, I believe it was 2 others. And then the gray alien was dressed in something like they had tried to make it look sort of American. It had on a T-shirt, and as if they had put clothes on it right at the last minute for this meeting. And it was telepathic, and each mind in the room was communicated with telepathically. And he had a discussion later on with his boss, and the general impression was that the non-human was trying to answer their questions, but that it was very succinct, and that they asked questions such as, how many of you are here on this planet? There would be no answer. There would be other questions that were of a technical nature, and there would be no answer. And yet, on other questions, they all clearly heard telepathic information.
Elaborate on telepathic information.
Mind to mind.
Mind to mind.
I would just add, I recall the witness speaking about that, and certainly it's exactly right, Linda, that what he said to me. In terms of the very few specific answers this being allegedly gave, but to one is, why are they here? There was not a direct answer except a reply that we are not hostile, or thoughts to that effect.
When you say telepathic, that means that the being was communicating directly, understood the way our mind worked. Now, were we able to telepathically communicate with them, or was it a one-way street?
I can add something here along those lines. And then humans, by definition, live in a mental island. And we're dealing with intelligences that not only can place thoughts, images, movies, symbols directly into human minds very easily, they simultaneously upload information from human minds. And I have had the experience of talking with a man who was working for the Central Intelligence Agency when he had an interaction with one of these beings. There have been many, sir. And that his whole mission was to have the experience of the upload-download telepathically with a being under a completely non-threatening, totally organized fashion. And he told me that they had warned him that the process of the telepathic download, upload usually disables humans. Humans usually faint. And that he had the experience, and the way he described it was, he said, Linda, imagine 7 feature films going through your mind at the same time with heat, temperature, sense, sound, all of the senses and more. And then overlying those 7 feature films are 3-dimensional gold symbols that we would relate probably to Sumerian cuneiform or Assyrian symbols. And that all of that goes through your head in a matter of what your brain, your human brain, not being able to interact, but has a sense of very rapid time. And that when it's all over, as he said, if God asked me, What had been downloaded into my mind, I could not tell you, but I know that everything that I have ever lived was uploaded. That is frankly the level of telepathic interaction that has been going on in this planet for a very long time.
My time has expired, but maybe later on we'll come back because I have other questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Representative Hooley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about your father, thank you very much for doing that he had kept the secret for years. How or why did he finally communicate the information to you and the family?
Well, it started much later. He started organizing RAF Manston reunions. He so loved his squadron that he organized trips to England and cruises, and I met his buddies, by the way, and they were all just the greatest guys. A lot of them were World War II veterans. And he would organize these trips, and you know, I guess at this point he started trying to find out answers as to why this had happened to him. So he was asking his squadron mates, and I guess he felt a little comfortable at that point. He'd been retired for a number of years. And he ran across Nick Pope, and they were able to declassify the event. But it took many years after that it was declassified. But he had started to speak about it after the reunions. But he would never speak publicly. And, you know, as a matter of fact, I had no idea that this had happened, that he had carried that burden. And my grandfather and him were extremely tight. And he cried that he couldn't tell his own father because of that secret. And he didn't tell a soul. Could you imagine dogfighting like this fellow the other day from Peru? And yet, when he landed, the spooks that were there on the ground greeted him and said, hey, let's find out what that was. Our spooks told him never talk about it to anybody, including your wife, your kids, your family, your colonel, your commander. Nobody could he talk to. Nobody. And he carried that. And I can tell you, when I saw him cry on stage, my dad has now lost his voice because of, you know, Agent Orange and all of the crap that goes with it. But I've found mine. I'm my father's son. I will get answers. I promised him that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, is there a way to put together people? For example, we've heard a lot over the last 4.5 days about the number of pilots who have seen other kinds of vehicles that are not from the United States or from this world flying. Is there a way to get some of these pilots together? I mean, are they willing to talk about what they saw? Do you know?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I would just repeat the name of the organization I mentioned earlier in my statement, NARCAP, which is the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. I mention them because they are very rigorous, very scientific, very low-key, very non-sensational, and deal precisely with these individuals that you're talking about and have done so for decades. There have been a number of cases in which we've had pilots go on the record. In fact, Stephen Bassett in the past, during one of his organized events right here in the D.C. area, had a pilot panel. That was, I think, very effective. I think this is a great idea. There's no lack of very good data and information out there. The problem is unfortunately, that these individuals who are all sober and careful and, as you heard in the previous panel, still get ridiculed by the media. They get the tinfoil hat placed on them. This is something that none of us have found a way to get around that, no matter how rigorous we are. In my own work years ago when I started researching this phenomenon, I had this naive idea, really I did, that if I just did the most rigorous, careful, historical treatment of the phenomenon that I could, then that just might be the magic bullet, the bat that hits the ball out of the park. And, you know, it didn't happen. We keep trying. I would say that we're in an era now where global communication among researchers has improved and is improving, so that I am looking forward to, I think, the next few years where there really should be better coordination among groups in the United States and elsewhere to be able to put together events like this, and I think more is better.
I think with the social media that there's a possibility that you might be able to do that. I mean, people seem to trust pilots. Rightfully or wrongfully, they trust pilots. And they're the most logical group who fly all the time, who are back and forth across this country, across this world, that as they see what they've seen, it seems to me that there would be some validity. I mean, the public would accept that premise if enough of them got together and talked about it.
When you add up enough of the near misses and encounters that are up in the air,
Notice
it's startling.
The gentle lady's time has expired.
Thank you.
Go now to Representative Bartlett. You have 6 minutes.
If I might reserve my time, sir.
Okay. We'll then go to Representative Woolsey. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think Representative Bartlett's waiting for me to lead him through this. Thank you, Jeffrey Torres, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And congratulations, Richard, for that video.
Thank you.
You did such an amazing job, and it was so helpful because you didn't lead the witness ever. I mean, the gentleman. It was clear that's who he is, and that's what he wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Linda, you have said, I think more than once this week, that non-humans are acting within our environment. What do you mean by that, and how do you know that's happening? And, I mean, give me some examples. Other than being in a space vehicle and coming to Earth. Well, I mean, if that's it, tell me that.
I guess it's the accumulation of so many people that have talked to me off the record, who have died.
Who have died?
That I was given a chance to talk to people who were in some sort of the end of their days, and I had either been sought out or I had been referenced. And when you are talking to people who are essentially on their deathbed, and they are describing for you the interactions that they've had with extraterrestrial biological entities in the context of their professional capacity for the United States government, how would I question what they were saying to me? Can I provide for you right here in this room one of the many different types of extraterrestrial biological entities? I cannot. Do I believe that these primarily male individuals who have shown to me at least enough evidence about where they worked publicly, which not always connects to where they get their paycheck, that they are telling me the truth about their life and their experiences with extraterrestrial biological entities, craft, technology, the physics that we have been encountering and stunned by. I believe them. And I'm a longtime TV producer and investigative reporter. And as I have said before, the challenge of getting people on the record is the single biggest difficulty in this entire field, because since World War II, our extremely good and sophisticated counterintelligence units that got us through World War II are exactly the people who took over at the request of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman. How do you keep all of this evolving from the press, the media, Congress, the Supreme Court, and every other government agency?
Yeah, okay. But thank you. Somewhere between now and the end of this day, I'd like somebody to describe for me the different non-humans that that have been observed, and what the differences are, and do they intermingle? And I mean, I think we've not asked that question.
Well, I can give you at least a short answer.
Okay.
One man who retired from the Defense Intelligence Agency, who sought me out because of something I had published in one of my 4 books, and he had been exposed to it, but because everything is so compartmentalized on a need-to-know basis, he came to me as a reporter, and it goes to the heart of what he said. He said, my job when I was working for the Defense Intelligence Agency was to study and monitor the geopolitical territorial conflicts of 3 extraterrestrial biological entities who have been involved with this planet for at least 270 million years. He broke them down as blonde-haired, blue-eyed, that we would not distinguish from the so-called archangels of history. The second group would be standing-up reptoids, and the third group would be a huge variety of what are called grays.
Okay, and do they intermingle? Are they all separate?
They do not get along.
They do not get along.
I would add, if I may, that research has pointed out even a greater variety than this. If you want to, depending on how you deal with abduction research, there is some of this that's fairly extensive. They would talk about insectoid-type creatures. And then let's not forget, there are a large number of individuals who have had or claim to have, sometimes I think persuasively, to be honest with you, some form of contact with other beings that is not physical. This is a very difficult subject to get one's hand on, but these stories do not go away. Who are these beings? Are they good, bad, indifferent to our fate is another issue we can discuss. In terms of interrelationships, you're asking exactly the kind of question that many researchers still would like to get to the bottom of.
Okay, thank you. Tom, my time is up.
And a gentle, yes, thank you. Jeffrey Torres, I was very interested in your testimony. You said something, and I think I know what you meant, but you didn't exactly say it this way, so I'm going to ask you if this is what you meant, and it's kind of a yes or no question. You said that what your father witnessed in terms of the maneuverability of the particular object defied the law of physics. Well, I don't think physics law, as we currently understand it, says that you can't move very, very quickly. There's no limit on acceleration or velocity, to my understanding. Of course, Dr. Bartlett may be able to help us more than I can on that. But what I think you meant to say is it defies any technology we know that can achieve those kinds of accelerations and motions. Am I correct in understanding that?
Well, more than that, what he meant was that if there was a fighter pilot in that other aircraft, he would have died from the G-forces. Yeah. There were so many extreme maneuvers that this thing had made. Actually,
that it couldn't have been earthly.
He was convinced that it was of alien origin, and he actually, because of that, he actually went to college for his aerospace engineering degree.
Sure.
And then he worked with Wernher von Braun in the NASA space program under the Saturn and the several of the moon launches, and he ended up
No,
getting a
and
PhD.
no,
Yeah,
no,
but
right.
he
No, I
was
have no
he had
question
more
about it.
questions. He had so many questions as a result of that.
I have no question of his qualifications. I just want you
Yeah,
to
no,
know.
I mean, it just was an impact on him. He just couldn't understand it. He wanted
Oh,
knowledge.
Sure. So he's wondering if there might be another
And
extraterrestrial explanation of what he observed. I
and it's
understand that.
interesting because,
But
you
I
know,
need to reclaim my time. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I've gotta
it's
get,
an interesting. What I was going to tell you is that of all the people in my life I've encountered,
yeah.
my dad was a consummate scientist. He was an atheist. He's just this total right lane brain.
I
so.
appreciate it. Thank you, and I believe it, that he was an outstanding scientist. Richard Dolan, I'm going to turn to you and ask you this. Researchers have looked at a lot of things related to this. The maneuverabilities are certainly interesting. But one of the reasons why I think there is skepticism that these objects have extraterrestrial origins is because of, I'll just put it bluntly, Einstein's relativity theory that nothing can go faster than the speed of light. We've heard about physics that are not currently known in terms of time, space, collapse or something. I can't remember some of the words used. And I don't think this panel, with the possible exception of Dr. Bartlett, who's had to leave, I guess, would be capable of really understanding very much of all that. But my question to you is, as someone who's researched and talked to many, many people, including scientists and everything else, and people that really have beliefs and theories about UFO and ufology, as you call it, what are the most compelling studies of people that could explain distance questions without suspending Einstein's theory of relativity, law of physics that's well accepted that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light?
Mr. Cook, I'm very, very grateful you asked that question. First of all, I just want to mention that regarding atmospheric phenomena, atmospheric objects that seem to defy the laws of physics, but of course they don't. Nothing defies the laws of physics. So the question was asked previously, why don't they make sonic booms? How do the pilots withstand G-forces? All of this is related. I would just point out there was an outstanding study done years ago by a retired NASA scientist, Paul Hill, who was known throughout NASA as their go-to guy for UFOs. And his exact question was, how is it that UFOs do what they do? And his conclusion in his study, published posthumously in the 1990s, called Unconventional Flying Objects, a Scientific Analysis, was that they do not, if you assume, because nothing works aerodynamically, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense if you factor in what he called field propulsion. That is a kind of anti-gravity. And in fact, now what he couldn't figure out was what is the source of power for that. No one knows that. But actually, Hill did an outstanding work. His mathematics is very sound, and I would simply recommend it to everyone. Now, the distance problem has also been discussed by a number of scientists in the last generation, probably most famously the mathematician Miguel Alcubierre, who the math on what he did seems to be very, very good according to physicists. Essentially, think warp drive in Star Trek in the sense that if you have a source of power significant enough, it is possible and has been demonstrated mathematically for a craft literally to kind of shrink the space ahead and elongate it behind. You're not violating Einstein's E equals mc squared. It's literally space itself that gets
I'm going to reclaim my time
folded.
only for the reason to just get this last question into you. When you say that you're kind of using anti-gravity as a way of saying we don't have to suspend Einstein's theory of relativity. But if you do that, then you're suspending his second theory, the general gravitational theories. So what I'm asking, let me ask you this. Aren't there researchers out there that have put together concepts or statements or proposed theories that say, hey, if you travel at even 10% of the speed of light, and if you have,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I'm
In
trying
fact,
to-
Stanton Friedman, who was here earlier this week, has discussed this at length. There's a gentleman named Paul Laviolette, another one named Thomas Vallone, both of whom have done a lot of work in electrogravitics. I think it's very sound and worth anyone's attention.
thank you, I see my time has expired. So let's see, we're now going back to first now to Representative Kilpatrick. Oh, is she not here?
He's not here.
Well, we'll get her later. Let's see, who else? Oh,
Congressman Bartlett.
yes, yes, you're back, thank you. Yes,
I thought that she was next.
she is, but she's not here.
Okay,
So we're going with you, Representative Bartlett.
All right.
A
Thank you
man
very
who
much.
may
and
be
thank you
able to
all.
know all these physics rules that I don't.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. That there is a cloak of frequency, I think, is undeniable. Like the symptoms of a very serious disease, if the doctor doesn't know the etiology of the disease, it becomes very difficult to treat the symptoms. How in the heck did we get here with this cloak of secrecy? You really can't treat the disease until you know how it was engendered. And I appreciated your testimony, Mr. Dolan, very much. You suggested at least one possible etiology for this symptom of this cloak of secrecy. Let me suggest another one that may give us the hope that it will be reversed, because if you're right, and I hope you're not, but if you're right, there's no hope that or little hope that they're going to reverse this cloak of secrecy. Let me suggest another one. For 20 years before I came to the Congress, I worked for the military in every capacity you can work for the military, directly for them, captive Navy contractor, 8 years for IBM, as an independent contractor, Roscoe Bartlett and Associates, doing research work for the military. And for the past 20 years, until just 4 months ago, I was in the U.S. government. 20 years on the Armed Services Committee, 20 years interfacing with the leaders of our military and our government. I will tell you that I think that all of those that I have met make their decisions on the basis of what they think is best for America. And I think that these decisions, I would like to believe that this decision, and it was made very quickly after Roswell, was it not? Within a few hours, the decision was made that we were going to have a cloak of secrecy over this thing. Let me suggest that they made that cloak of secrecy because they thought that if they revealed the truth to the American people, there would be panic, like the panic after War of the Worlds on radio with H.G. Wells. If that was in fact the ideology for this, then it becomes pretty easy to reverse it. Because now, after all these years, there's no evidence that if there are extraterrestrials, there's no evidence that they are hostile. So now, all these years we've been trying to protect the American people from themselves. I'm not sure I agree with that judgment, by the way, that they need to be protected from themselves. But all these years we've been protecting them because we knew better than they. But now, obviously, there's no threat, because these people have been here for a very long time, if in fact they're extraterrestrials. So now we can come clean with the American people. How about that?
Wise words, sir. I agree with you. I think that the secret has its own momentum. It generates its own profitability. It generates its own bureaucracy. It generates its own need to continue, it seems to me. How do you tell the world that you've been lying for 60-plus years?
I think you tell them, sir, because you thought that was what you had to do, because you couldn't have the kind of panic that occurred after the War of the Worlds, this little thing on radio.
Certainly we agree on this. And certainly I think we could say that in the very beginning the secrecy would have started precisely because it was not known. How could President Truman really know what he was dealing with? How could his advisors really know? So it seems logical to me, and I'm sure many people think about it, that you would say, wait a minute, let's get together, let's think about this, let's figure out what we have, and we'll come to a decision, at a certain period of time. My own belief is that breakthroughs in understanding the technology were made. Greed comes into the factor, money comes into the factor, power, and the incentive just goes away. And I think that through the Eisenhower years, at the very least,
How quickly, sir, did they know that
it went black.
there were entities, these biological entities? But I hesitate to use that word biological. That's
Well,
this could be
it depends
something
on what evidence you judge. There are leaked documents. I consider them legitimate by and large. These are housed. One of the witnesses here, Dr. Robert Wood, is one of the individuals who's discussed them. They're called the majestic documents. If you take them at face value, it's been known since very early on, since the 1940s, that there are other entities that are here, extraterrestrial biological entities.
Yeah, the crafts could have been Soviet. We would have believed anything about the Soviets.
Well, indeed,
The entity certainly could not have been Soviet. So if they knew about that, they knew very early this was extraterrestrial.
They had to.
And they had to. And if they knew that, then they could have had a legitimate concern that if this was made public, the public was going to panic. So for the good of the public, they couldn't make it public. Is that a reasonable argument?
Yeah, World War II had just ended. The entire world was lying flat on its back. Millions of homeless and hungry people. Everyone was just trying to get back to a sense of normalcy. I can only imagine how the U.S. military would have responded to something this exotic dropping into their lap.
Yeah. But if this is in fact the ideology, then isn't there some hope that they can now say, gee, we've been watching this for all these years. They obviously are not hostile. Yes, well, it is extraterrestrial.
My opinion is that there will never, ever be any momentum from the top to move this forward. But the good news is that they're not the only game in town. And the fact is our society is changing as dramatically as it is, as rapidly as it is. And there will be something that will force their hand. I'm convinced of this, and I think it'll happen within a generation or less. And at that point, that's when the battle for truth begins, not ends, because there'll still be spin doctors and attempts. The CIA will never just walk away from the table just because we figure something out. They're not going to say, oh, here's all of our information. So, the battle will continue, but at least it'll be out in the open.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Yeah, let's see, I think, I believe Representative Hooley may have a couple of minutes, or the timekeeper, has everybody used, okay. So my notes, okay. Excuse me? Oh,
Except for Representative Kilpatrick.
Right, and I'm willing to give about 10 seconds before I close. What? Yeah, so I think we're going to close this panel. I hate to do that without having Representative Kilpatrick get her 6 minutes, but we barely have 1 hour for the lunch, which is what we tried to agree. So I'm going to declare a recess. We'll be back at, what time do we get back? 1:45? Yeah, be back here at 1:45.
55 minutes for lunch, 55.
Yeah.
Steve's going to add that to the schedule. Every member will get a couple of minutes. Except for you, if you're not here then. Went by fast, didn't it?
Yeah. I don't know where you got the witnesses, but boy, are they good.
This is just the top. I mean, there's another 400 just as good. Military pilots, government agencies. We're going to hear again from Paul Hellyer, the former Minister of Defense for Canada.
Oh, great.
After you're gone. He wants 20 minutes. He said he couldn't do it in 10. He was just going to leave. So we gave him 20.
Yeah.
The Minister of Defense of Canada. Former Minister of Canada.
Yeah, if I put that far, I'd want it.
Yeah.
So, what you got to think about this. Darlene and Carolyn are leaving before the last panel.
Ah.
So, yeah, I am. Well, so
I didn't know
is
Carolyn was too.
I think she's leaving at 3.
Okay. Maybe you guys can hitch a ride together.
Well, no, not that.
Oh, what?
When did they give their remarks?
Oh, well, you should do it. Ask the chair.
Oh, no.
We should do it